I awoke before the world had begun to murmur its waking songs, before the sparrows composed their morning verses and the marketplace ground into its daily motion. It was that sacred hour when the veil between what is seen and what is felt grows thin, when shadows still stretch long across the walls, and the silence is thick with presence. My eyes fluttered open not from disturbance, but from something subtler, more delicate than sound. It was as if a hand had touched my soul and not my body. I did not know why I had stirred. There was no call from outside, no lamp lit, no prayer bell. Yet I was pulled from the sweetness of sleep by something so quiet and deep that it did not belong to the world of reason. Lying there, beneath the soft folds of my robe, I felt the room around me like a womb of silence. The stillness had a shape, a weight. I did not reach for my thoughts. They seemed irrelevant now. Instead, I turned inward, instinctively, as if I were listening for the murmur of a spring beneath the sand. The wind had not yet stirred the branches outside my chamber, and the stars above the tiled roof still clung to the dome of night. Everything was asleep, and yet, something immense was awake, something within me, beyond me, beneath all I thought I was. I realized, as one realizes a sudden scent in the air, that I was listening, but not with my ears. There was another kind of listening unfolding, not directed outward, but inward and downward, as though the roots of my being were leaning toward a subterranean river. The mind, my faithful companion, my tool, my questioner, was silent. Not out of weariness, but as though it had stepped aside with reverence. In its place, a deeper faculty emerged, an awareness that didn't use language, that didn't divide or compare. I became acutely conscious of a sense that lives beneath the senses. It did not measure, it did not conclude, it simply received. And what it received was not sound, nor sight, nor memory, but a presence. A vastness. A warmth that was not heat, a music that had no notes. I could not say it was outside me, nor could I say it was within. It was like a beloved who sits so close you cannot tell where your breath ends and theirs begins. I rose slowly, every movement wrapped in quiet, as if not to disturb the mystery that surrounded me. The mat beneath my feet was cool, and the earth itself seemed to breathe in that hour before sunrise. I walked to the open window and looked out at the dim shape of the horizon. A line of purple blurred into a veil of blue, and beneath it, the world waited like a canvas not yet painted upon. My soul leaned toward that emptiness, not out of yearning, but out of recognition. It knew something the mind had not told it. It had always known. And in that knowledge was neither pride nor explanation. It simply was. There was no question in me, no desire for answers. Only presence. Only listening. Only the deep, trembling awareness that something greater than thought was speaking, not in words, not in teachings, but in the very act of being. And I, in turn, was listening not with my ears, not with the intellect that had carried me through years of study and verse, but with a listening so pure it did not need understanding. It was enough to hear. Even if nothing was said in the language of men, I was being filled. I remembered then an image from long ago, before I had books, before I had followers or seekers gathering at my feet. I had once stood beside my father in the marketplace, no more than a child, and seen an old man sitting in silence beside a fountain. People passed by him, some offering coins, others food. But he responded to none. His eyes were closed, his face unmoving. I asked my father what he was doing, and my father said, "He listens to what cannot be heard. He listens to the one who speaks without a tongue." I had not understood then. But now, after many journeys of heart and soul, I did. That man had possessed the ears of the soul. And now, so did I. The soul's ears are not formed of flesh and cartilage. They do not belong to the body, nor are they trained by repetition. They awaken only when the mind ceases its constant questioning, when thought bows in the presence of silence, when longing becomes stillness. These ears hear not the sounds of the world, but the rhythm behind it, the heartbeat of the divine, pulsing through the veins of existence. They hear the sigh of the stars, the trembling of atoms, the hidden weeping of hearts behind composed faces. They hear the song of the rose as it opens, the praise of the stone resting in the riverbed. They hear the voice of the friend. And so I stood there, barefoot, breath suspended, listening to that which cannot be defined. Not trying to catch a meaning, but simply allowing myself to be carried by it. It was not like listening to a message, it was like becoming the space in which all messages arise. And within me, something opened, something ancient and tender. A door the mind had never found, now slowly swinging wide. Behind it, nothing but light. In that moment, I understood what no lecture, no scripture, no scholar had ever truly explained, that the soul has been given its own ears. Ears that do not strain or seek, but simply receive. And through them, we are drawn into truths too wide for thought, too sacred for speech. This is where love begins. This is where God whispers. The dawn had barely touched the horizon when I stepped barefoot into the dew-covered earth, drawn by a silence that felt less like the absence of sound and more like the presence of something waiting, an invitation issued not in words, but in the breath between them. The world around me was wrapped in a stillness so complete it felt sacred. The village remained asleep behind me, its rooftops slumbering beneath the slow unfurling of morning mist, and the trees stood like sentinels, their branches bowed in reverence to the hush that precedes the first light. My feet led me to the edge of the open field, the one I often visited when I needed to remember who I was, beneath the robes, beneath the names, beneath the thoughts that circled endlessly like moths around a flame. It was not a path I took with intention, but one my soul seemed to walk of its own accord. The field stretched outward like a dream half remembered, its borders blurred by mist and possibility. In its heart, the reeds stood tall, slender green stalks that moved with the wind, not resisting, not questioning, only swaying to a rhythm older than time. I had walked this field many times before, sometimes with a mind full of poetry, other times with questions heavy in my chest. But today was different. Today I felt as though the field had been waiting for me, as though the reeds had gathered like an assembly of wise ones prepared to speak in a tongue no tongue could shape. I stepped among them slowly, each footfall careful and reverent, as if I were entering a sacred space carved not by walls or roof but by presence alone. The breeze picked up gently, a breath that seemed to come not from the earth or sky but from something in between, something unseen but intimately near. The reeds responded immediately, shivering with life, their leaves brushing one another in a manner that, to an untrained ear, might have sounded random or aimless. But I heard something different. I heard conversation. Not in syllables or syntax, but in tone and silence, in rustles and pauses. There was no structure the mind could translate, yet the soul understood. I closed my eyes. The wind pressed gently against my face, carrying with it the scent of water and wildflowers, and the whispers of the reeds grew clearer, not louder, but clearer, as if the less I tried to understand them, the more they made sense. I began to feel something ancient stir within me, like the recollection of a language I had once known before birth, before thought, before the body. The reeds spoke of things I could not name, of joy without cause, of longing without sorrow, of being without question. I heard them speak of seasons, not as cycles of change, but as lovers who return without needing to explain their absence. I heard them speak of death as rest, of silence as truth, of stillness as a voice more articulate than any word. My hands reached out instinctively, grazing their delicate bodies. Each touch was like a note plucked from an invisible harp, each bend of a reed a movement in a greater choreography. I could feel the way the universe moved through them, not in grand gestures but in the tiniest tremble of a leaf. In that moment, it occurred to me, not as a thought, but as a knowing, that everything around me was listening too. The reeds were not only speaking, they were also hearing. The field heard the footsteps of the wind. The soil heard the dreams of the roots. The sky heard the unspoken gratitude rising from the earth, and all of it echoed inside me, folding into the hollow chamber of my chest, the place where the soul keeps its secrets. I remembered suddenly a passage I had once read as a boy, something buried in the pages of an old Sufi text, half forgotten but now glowing like a gem in the back of my mind. When the heart is truly quiet, it hears the grass praying. I had not understood it then. I had thought it metaphor, the kind of poetic excess mystics used to charm or confuse. But now, standing amidst these reeds, that line felt like a bell rung deep within my ribs. The grass was indeed praying. The reeds were whispering hymns. The wind was a chorus. And I was not separate from any of it. I was not merely a man observing the world. I was part of its speech, an instrument in its orchestra, a breath within its breathing. The sun began to rise more boldly now, spilling gold across the field, lighting each reed until it seemed to glow from within. I opened my eyes and saw the world not as a collection of objects, but as a single living presence, one that shimmered with intention, with music, with meaning that could not be grasped, only felt. My mind, ever curious, made a gentle attempt to understand, to place these experiences into thoughts and explanations. But my soul hushed it like a mother quieting a child too eager to speak during a sacred rite. "Not now," it said. "Just listen." And so I did. I stood for what felt like hours or moments. It is impossible to say, in that field, in that prayer, in that wordless symphony of life. I listened not with ears, but with the center of my being. And in that listening, I remembered who I was, not as Rumi the teacher, the poet, the scholar, but as a soul with ears of its own, hearing the language of the world in the only way it could be truly known, without the need to explain. The mind observes the form of things, but the soul hears their essence. The mind asks questions, the soul receives communion. When I finally turned to walk back to the village, I did not leave the field behind. It had entered me. The whispers of the reeds, the song of the wind, the hush of the rising sun, they had become part of my breath. I did not need to remember their messages in words. I had heard them with the part of myself that does not forget. I had listened with the ears I did not know I had. And because of that, I would never hear the world the same way again. The heat of the afternoon clung to the stones beneath my feet as I wove deeper into the tangle of the city, drawn not by intention but by a quiet instinct that led me through narrow alleys and open squares. The marketplace unfolded around me like a breathing thing, ever shifting in tone and texture, layered with human voices that rose and fell like waves crashing onto the shores of need. The crowd ebbed and surged, and I let myself move with it, not as a guest nor as a sage, but simply as another presence among many. The scent struck me first: roasted almonds, sun-warmed fruit, dried herbs crushed beneath hurried steps. Then came the colors: scarves dyed like fire and dusk, spices arranged in pyramids of crimson, gold, and umber, glass jars reflecting fractured light like fragments of forgotten stars. Yet none of this, vivid though it was, held my full attention. My soul was listening, reaching beneath the brightness and bustle, feeling for the pulse hidden in the noise. I passed a stall where an old man carved wooden animals with slow, practiced hands. A child watched him in silence, eyes wide and shining. The man did not speak, and neither did the boy, but the space between them was alive with exchange. The world often forgets such moments, moments where nothing is said, but everything is understood. The man carved not merely a toy but a gesture of care, and the boy did not merely observe, he received it as a blessing. I paused to watch. There was something so holy in their silence that even the birds overhead seemed to quiet their wings. Their souls were speaking in the language of presence, and I listened, not with my mind, which wanted to call it beautiful or pure, but with something deeper, quieter, that did not need to name. Not far from them, two young men argued loudly over the price of silk. Their faces were flushed, their hands cutting through the air like blades. To the passerby, it was a dispute, a haggling match typical of the bazaar. But to the soul, it was a story unfolding beneath the surface. Their anger was not real anger, it was performance. I could feel it in the way their feet shifted nervously, in the tremble behind their assertive tones. What they truly longed for was recognition, validation, perhaps even friendship, but they had not been taught how to ask for such things directly. So instead, they sparred with prices and pride. I looked at them and felt no judgment, only compassion. The soul sees behind the curtain. It does not accuse, it understands. Further ahead, I came upon a man selling oil lamps. He had a voice like a song, melodic, persuasive, warm. People gathered around him, drawn not so much by his wares but by his presence. He spoke of light, of how the right flame can soften the hardest night. And as he spoke, I saw in his eyes a flicker of longing. He believed his words, yet he also spoke them for himself. He was not only trying to sell a lamp, he was trying to illuminate his own path, to convince himself that light could still be kindled in the places within him that had grown cold. The soul caught that contradiction and did not recoil from it. It embraced it. There is no shame in trying to remind ourselves of truths we fear we've forgotten. The marketplace was a theater of souls. At every turn, a new play unfolded, some tragic, some comedic, all achingly human. A woman stood alone with a basket of handmade soaps, her fingers twitching with anxiety as people walked past her without pause. Her eyes darted from face to face, hopeful, then disappointed, then resigned. The mind would have seen a vendor with poor luck. But the soul heard a story of someone who had put a piece of her love into each bar, made with herbs she picked herself, wrapped in cloth she embroidered with her daughter's help, and now stood in the naked vulnerability of offering herself to the world. It was not about soap. It was about hope. Each time someone walked past without stopping, I could feel her heart dim just a little, like a candle flickering in a gust. I stopped before her, not out of pity but out of reverence. I bought one, touched her hand gently as I did, and she smiled, not with her lips, but with the deep, silent place where joy is born. That smile said, "I am seen." And that is what every soul hungers for more than bread. Somewhere behind the stalls, a small group of children had gathered around a blind musician. He sat on a crate with a newt resting across his lap, fingers moving like water over its strings. His song drifted through the air like incense, wrapping itself around the crowd with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the city's chaos. His eyes remained closed, but I felt no sorrow in him. There was no bitterness in his music. On the contrary, there was clarity. Each note was a prayer, and every silence between the notes was its echo. The children listened without fidgeting, without distraction, because their souls, unburdened by the layers of adulthood, still heard clearly. I listened too, and in his song, I felt a truth that no verse could match, that beauty does not require the eyes to see it, it requires only the soul to receive it. And so I moved through the day, from stall to stall, from face to face, and everywhere I looked, I saw not things, not noise, not the scatter of commerce, but 1,000 veiled truths. There were the words people said, and then there were the meanings they carried, meanings that had nothing to do with the price of goods or the weather or the latest decree from the Sultan. These meanings trembled beneath every conversation, like shadows behind candlelight. And I, no longer concerned with speech alone, had begun to hear with the ears the soul had quietly honed. By the time I left the marketplace, the sun had begun its descent, casting long golden shafts across the walls of the city. I walked with slow steps, my cloak heavy with the dust of the day, but my spirit light, almost weightless. For though the mind might have called the marketplace loud and crowded, the soul knew otherwise. It had been a sanctuary, a temple without walls, where each person's story, grief, hope, and silent prayer had become a verse in a sacred poem still being written. I returned to my chamber in the waning light and sat in stillness. The sounds of the marketplace echoed not in my ears, but in the chambers of my heart. And I wept, not from sadness, but from the unbearable intimacy of it all. To witness people not as bodies moving through duty, but as souls crying out in a language their tongues had forgotten, it was almost too beautiful to bear. The mind would forget by morning, but the soul had heard. And because it had heard, it would remember forever. Night deepened its cloak over the city like a patient guardian, folding the streets and homes into quiet shadows, yet the courtyard where I sat with her seemed to hold its own kind of light, soft, flickering, and alive. The oil lamp's flame danced gently between us, casting long, wavering shadows on the whitewashed walls and the delicate jasmine that curled upward, releasing its fragrance into the still air. It was as if the night itself leaned close to listen, aware that something fragile yet profound was unfolding beneath its dark canopy. Time stretched thin, no longer measured by hours or minutes, but by the breaths shared in silence, the pauses pregnant with unspoken understanding. She sat across from me, the weight of her sorrow softened by the space we had created together. Her eyes, once distant and heavy, now held a glimmer of something I could not name, perhaps a faint flicker of hope or simply the quiet relief of having been truly seen. The lines etched by grief on her face did not disappear, nor did the burden she carried vanish. But in the shelter of that moment, her soul dared to unclench, allowing a breath to pass through the places long held tight. I too felt something within me unravel, a tenderness so deep it humbled the heart, reminding me that true strength often lies in the courage to simply be present with pain. The air around us seemed charged with an ancient energy, one that has flowed through countless generations of seekers and sufferers before us. It was the sacred current of shared human experience, the silent communion of souls who meet not with words or solutions but with the simple, radical act of listening. In that act, everything shifts. The walls between us dissolve. The isolation that pain so often breeds breaks apart like fragile glass, leaving behind a space vast enough for healing to begin. I realized then that listening is not passive. It is an opening, a gateway through which grace enters. Her story, though spoken in few words, echoed endlessly in that sacred space. I saw not only the woman before me but all who have been abandoned, forgotten, or left to carry burdens too heavy for one heart alone. The woman who wakes to an empty home, the child who waits by a silent door, the elder who watches years slip away without reunion, each carries a silence too loud for the mind to quiet but not for the soul to bear. That silence is a language itself, composed of absence and longing, despair and endurance. And it is a language the soul's ears understand without hesitation. As I sat there, the world outside the courtyard continued unaware. Candles flickered in distant windows, the faint murmur of late prayers rose and fell, the stars shifted imperceptibly in their celestial dance. But within this small sanctuary, time folded inward, and the present moment expanded infinitely. I breathed with her, matching the rhythm of her heart, anchoring my presence so fully that it became a refuge. In that refuge, the soul can exhale. The soul can soften. It can hold its own fractures without breaking. There is a profound humility in such presence. The mind longs to fix, to answer, to explain. It offers advice, remedies, and reassurances. But the soul knows that some wounds are not meant to be fixed, but to be felt fully, carried tenderly until their sharp edges dull. In those moments, to speak too soon, to rush toward resolution, is to deny the sacredness of grief itself. The soul listens patiently, allowing pain to speak in its own time, teaching us that sorrow, like love, has its own rhythms and seasons. I felt myself learning anew that night, relearning the ancient art of bearing witness, not as a master, but as a humble companion on the winding path of suffering and hope. I understood that to listen with the soul's ears is to offer a kind of love that transcends language. It is the love that holds space without intrusion, that embraces without possession, that sees without judgment. It is a love that waits silently, willing to be broken open so that others may find the courage to do the same. When the oil lamp finally guttered and died, we remained in the dark, our silence no longer empty but filled with a shared presence deeper than any spoken word. The jasmine scent lingered, mingling with the cool night air, a reminder that even in darkness there is fragrance, even in sorrow there is beauty. And as I watched her rise and disappear into the shadows, I carried with me the sacred gift of that evening, the knowledge that the soul's ears hear what the mind cannot, and in that hearing, the seed of healing is sown. I sat alone then, beneath the vast canopy of stars, feeling the steady pulse of life threading through the night. I whispered a prayer, not for answers, but for the strength to listen deeply, to bear witness fully, and to walk always with the humility of one who knows that the soul's language is silent yet never silent, hidden yet ever present. For in that language lies the bridge between us all, the sacred space where pain and love, loss and grace, meet and intertwine, whispering the eternal truth. To hear is to heal, to listen is to love. The night stretched on, vast and infinite, the darkness a gentle cradle that held the world in quiet embrace. In my chamber, the candle's flame flickered low, its light dancing softly on the walls, painting shadows that breathed and moved like living things. I sat cross-legged on the floor, still and silent, my eyes half closed, not out of sleepiness, but because I wished to see not with my eyes, but with the inner vision that opens only in the stillness between breaths. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of sandalwood and jasmine from the garden outside, a fragrance that seemed to mingle with the silence, weaving itself into the very fabric of the night. Within that silence, I felt the pulse of the world, subtle, steady, like the beating of a vast heart whose rhythm I had always carried within me, though I had only just learned to listen for it. It was a sound not made by any instrument or voice, but by the communion of all things, the slow rustling of leaves in the dark, the distant call of a night bird, the whisper of the wind through narrow alleys. These were the notes of a hidden symphony, one that could be heard only by the soul's ears, attuned to the language beyond words and reason. As I breathed deeply, allowing myself to sink into this sacred stillness, memories surfaced like fragments of a dream. I remembered long ago, as a youth wandering the fields and hills around my home, how I had often sat beneath the sky and felt a presence so vast it overwhelmed my senses, a presence that spoke not in language, but in the silent song of stars, in the gentle pulse of the earth beneath me. In those moments, I glimpsed the truth that the soul has ears not for sound alone, but for the music of existence itself, the harmony that binds all things in invisible threads of love and longing. Yet I also remembered how easy it is to forget this truth, lost as we are in the ceaseless chatter of the mind, in worries and plans, in the endless striving that consumes so many days. The mind is restless, always reaching for answers, for certainty, for control. It demands explanations and neat conclusions, and when the soul's subtle song resists being pinned down, the mind grows frustrated and deaf. But the soul, patient and ancient, waits in quiet vigilance, knowing that it is only when the mind surrenders, when the self stills, that the true listening begins. I felt the weight of this understanding settle deeply within me. To listen with the soul is to open a door not only outward to the world, but inward to the very essence of being. It is to hear the unspoken prayers in a child's laughter, the unshed tears in a stranger's glance, the silent courage in a weary heart. It is to perceive the sacred beneath the mundane, the eternal within the fleeting. And in this way of listening, one finds connection, not just to others, but to the whole tapestry of life, woven from light and shadow, joy and sorrow, presence and absence. The flame beside me flickered again, as if breathing with the rhythm of my own heart. I realized that this listening is not passive, but a dynamic dance, a giving and receiving that transforms both listener and spoken to. When we listen with the soul, we offer a refuge, a sanctuary where truth can unfold without fear, where pain can be carried without judgment, where love can be felt without conditions. It is a sacred trust, a holy responsibility. And it is a source of profound healing, for the act of being heard with such depth mends wounds that words alone cannot touch. In the quiet, I thought of the many souls I had encountered, each carrying their own silent songs, some joyful, some broken, all beautiful. The marketplace's tumult, the woman's grief, the boy's quiet resilience, the blind musician's prayerful notes, they all echoed within me still, reminders that the world is alive with stories beneath stories, meanings beneath meanings. The mind may glimpse only the surface, but the soul hears the depths. And in hearing, it honors the sacredness of each life. Time lost meaning as dawn's first light crept slowly through the latticework window, painting my chamber with hues of pale gold and soft rose. I remained seated, wrapped in the quiet glow of awakening. There was a profound peace in knowing that this way of listening, this soul's hearing, is always present, waiting patiently for us to return to it, to open ourselves fully once more. It is an eternal gift, a bridge to the divine, a sanctuary where the language of the heart speaks freely beyond the mind's grasp. And so I resolved to carry this gift into every moment, to meet the world not only with my eyes and ears, but with the deeper, quieter sense that perceives what cannot be seen or spoken. For in that listening lies the essence of compassion, the root of understanding, and the path to true love. To hear with the soul's ears is to become a mirror for the unseen, a vessel for the sacred, a witness to the eternal song that sings through all creation. It is a journey without end, a mystery without answer, and yet the greatest truth I have ever known. The first light of morning seeped slowly into my chamber, the soft glow filtering through the latticed windows and casting delicate patterns of shadow and gold upon the stone floor. I awoke not from restless sleep, but from a deep and abiding stillness that had settled over me like a gentle tide throughout the night. The silence in the room was profound, yet it held within it a subtle vibration, the quiet pulse of the world breathing in tandem with my own heart. As I lay there, eyes closed but senses fully awake, I felt the familiar yet ever-new sensation of being part of something far greater than myself, a vast and unfolding mystery that stretched beyond time and space. Rising slowly, I stepped into the cool morning air that carried the lingering scent of jasmine and sandalwood from the night before. The city had begun to stir, its streets gradually filling with the sounds of merchants setting up their stalls, the distant calls to prayer weaving through the dawn, and the soft clatter of footsteps on cobblestones. But I was not drawn by these earthly noises alone. My soul reached toward the deeper currents that flow beneath the surface of all things, the invisible threads connecting every living heart and every breath of wind, every blade of grass and every shimmering star. Drawn instinctively toward the river that winds through our city like a silver serpent, I walked along its bank, the water flowing with quiet grace, reflecting the awakening sky. The river has always been a patient teacher to me, its endless movement reminding me that life is change and flux, a ceaseless dance of beginnings and endings. Yet beneath the surface of its restless currents lies a profound stillness, an unchanging essence that receives all things, holds them tenderly, and carries them onward without resistance or judgment. Watching the water, I felt my own soul's ears open wider, attuned not only to the rhythms of nature but also to the subtle cadences of the human heart. As I moved along the riverbank, memories and images came to me like gentle ripples spreading across a quiet pond. I thought of the faces and stories I had encountered, the woman whose heart was fractured by loss, the boy whose smile masked 1,000 silent sorrows, the blind musician whose melodies carried the weight of 1,000 prayers, the two men whose heated words hid their deeper fears and longings. Each story, each soul, was like a pebble dropped into the river, sending waves that touched faraway shores in ways we cannot always see or understand. And I knew that my own soul was part of this vast current, listening and carrying, weaving itself into the great tapestry of existence. Nearby, a small boat drifted gently on the water, its lone occupant humming a melody so soft and tender it seemed barely more than a breath upon the wind. Though I could not hear the words, my soul understood the feeling behind the song, a bittersweet blend of hope, longing, remembrance, and love. In that fleeting moment, I felt a profound connection not only to the singer but to all who have ever raised their voices into the silence, trusting that their songs would find ears beyond the grasp of reason and mind. Continuing my walk, I came upon a group of children playing by the water's edge. Their laughter rang out like crystalline bells, pure and unburdened, and for a time, the heaviness that often weighs upon the world lifted like morning mist under the sun's warm gaze. Watching them, I was reminded that the soul's ears are ever open to the innocent, to those who have yet to learn the masks and walls that life often demands. Their joy spoke a language of the heart, simple, direct, and unclouded by doubt or fear, a language that reaches deep within us to awaken the dormant parts longing for freedom and light. Yet beneath their laughter, I sensed a delicate vulnerability, the quiet questions of belonging, love, and recognition that even the youngest hearts carry within them. The soul hears these questions not as problems to be solved, but as sacred openings, doorways inviting us into deeper connection and understanding. It listens without judgment or haste, holding space for the full breadth of human experience, from the lightest joy to the darkest despair. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the earth in warm, golden light and setting the river's surface ablaze with shimmering reflections, a deep gratitude welled within me. I gave thanks for the gift of these moments, for the chance to witness the world not only through the eyes but through the soul's listening ears attuned beyond the noise and distraction to the subtle frequencies of truth that pulse beneath the surface. In hearing these silent songs, the soul creates a sanctuary, a sacred place where the weary may find rest, the broken may find healing, and love may flow freely without condition or expectation. Returning to my home, I carried this awareness like a flame burning steadily within my breast, a sacred light to guide me through every encounter, every conversation, every breath. I resolved to listen not only with my physical ears but with the deeper, quieter sense that perceives the invisible, that hears the things the mind cannot understand. For in such listening lies the essence of compassion, the root of wisdom, and the bridge that unites us with one another and with the divine presence that flows through all life. And so I continue on this path, learning anew with each step that the soul's ears are always open, patiently waiting for us to lay down our defenses, to be still and present, to receive the silent language of the heart. This language whispers of love and pain, loss and grace, presence and absence. It is a language not meant to be decoded by the mind but lived and embraced by the whole being. To hear with the soul's ears is to find the infinite within the finite, the sacred within the ordinary, the eternal song that sings beneath all things, calling us home. The day stretched before me like a vast canvas, unfolding endlessly in every direction, its colors shifting slowly with the rhythm of the sun's journey, from the soft gold of dawn spilling into pale blues of morning, through the fierce, shimmering amber of midday, and finally dissolving into the gentle violets and deepening indigos of twilight. Each moment carried its own texture, its own breath, and as I wandered through the city's winding streets, I was keenly aware of how all these shifting colors and sounds wove together in a seamless tapestry, both seen and unseen. The marketplace buzzed with its usual cacophony of voices and footsteps, the clang of metal, the rustle of cloth, the pungent scent of spices mixing with fresh fruit and dust. Yet beneath this noisy surface, I felt a quieter melody, the subtle, persistent hum of the world's hidden song that only the soul's ears could catch. This melody was not loud nor insistent. It was a thread woven delicately through the fabric of existence, stitching together joy and sorrow, hope and despair, courage and fear. The mind seeks to divide and categorize these experiences, labeling them as good or bad, light or dark, but the soul perceives beyond these narrow distinctions. It recognizes how these contrasting threads are in truth inseparable, bound together like the warp and weft of a sacred tapestry that tells the story of being itself. I felt myself standing amidst this vast, complex weaving, unable to see the entire pattern, yet deeply connected to every strand, every hue. As I moved away from the marketplace's heart, I found myself drawn to a quiet garden nestled between two ancient walls, its wildflowers blooming untamed and exuberant, spilling over with riotous colors, crimson, violet, gold, and white, each petal trembling softly in the warm afternoon breeze. The air here was thick with the scent of earth and living things, a fragrant symphony that spoke not through words but through its very presence. I sank onto a worn stone bench, letting my body relax and my mind fall away, allowing the garden's stillness to seep into my bones. In that profound quiet, the soul's ears opened wide, drinking deeply from the well of being that transcends thought and speech. From this stillness, a memory blossomed, one from my youth, when the world was wide and mysterious and I was learning the delicate art of listening. I recalled lying beneath the vast expanse of night, the sky above scattered with stars like precious jewels on black velvet. In those moments, I did not hear with my ears alone but with something deeper, a silent language woven of light and shadow, rhythm and breath, mystery and longing. The mind could only marvel helplessly at these whispers, but the soul, gifted with its own ears, could understand the eternal song vibrating beneath all things. The wild blooms around me seemed to echo this truth. They did not force their beauty, nor did they demand attention or praise. They grew with patient persistence, surrendering to the cycles of sun and rain, to growth and decay, embodying the quiet wisdom of nature's unfolding. I realized then that true listening resembles tending a garden, not rushing to impose order or speed, but creating space, nurturing with care, and trusting the natural unfolding of life's mysteries. The soul listens not to control or judge, but to receive and honor the unique journey of each being, however tangled or wild. As the sun traced its path across the sky, shifting light and shadow among the flowers, I thought again of the people I had met, the woman whose grief filled the spaces between her words, the boy whose laughter masked a hidden sorrow, the blind musician whose melodies were prayers woven from pain and hope, the two men whose angry voices barely concealed the yearning for peace beneath their conflict. Each of them was a note in the grand symphony of life, a fragment of a story too rich and complex for language alone. The soul hears their stories in the tremors beneath words, in the fleeting catch of breath, in the subtle trembling of a hand seeking connection. It listens with compassion and patience, holding a sacred space where the fullness of human experience can be present without rush or interruption. As the day gave way to evening, the city's noise softened, merchants packing away their goods, the streets gradually quieting, while the call to prayer rose like a gentle tide over rooftops and minarets. I rose from the bench, the cool air wrapping around me like a balm, and walked slowly through the narrowing streets. The scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air, mingling with the distant murmur of life settling into rest. My heart was full, not with easy answers, but with a profound awareness of the sacredness woven into every fleeting moment, every chance encounter. In the stillness of that gathering dusk, I grasped anew the immeasurable gift that is the soul's ears. They allow us to hear beyond spoken words to the silent language of the heart, a language of presence and vulnerability, of longing and love, of pain and hope intertwined. To listen in this way is to step beyond the illusion of separateness, to touch the invisible threads that weave all beings into the same sacred dance of life. And so I continue my journey, guided by this quiet, sacred music that only the soul can hear. I listen not for what can be said or explained, but for what must be felt, in the silences between words, in the spaces that hold us, in the currents unseen but deeply known. In this sacred listening lies the deepest connection, the truest understanding, and the boundless love that is the essence of all being, calling us ever onward toward wholeness and home. The evening settled softly over the city, folding it into a quiet embrace as twilight deepened into the velvety hues of night. The last traces of sunlight lingered like a tender caress on the domes and minarets, painting them in delicate shades of rose and gold before surrendering entirely to the encroaching darkness. The air cold and carried with it the mingled scents of night-blooming jasmine and freshly tilled earth, fragrances that stirred memories buried deep within my soul. I found myself drawn once more to the courtyard, a sacred space shaded by an ancient olive tree whose gnarled branches seemed to reach out, cradling the very sky itself. Settling beneath its protective boughs, I closed my eyes and surrendered to the enveloping silence, feeling the steady pulse of the world beneath my skin, a pulse that only the soul's ears can truly perceive. In this profound stillness, the boundary between myself and the rest of creation began to blur and dissolve. No longer was I simply a solitary figure resting beneath a tree. I became an integral thread woven into the vast and intricate tapestry of life, threaded through with infinite strands of joy and sorrow, hope and despair, love and loss. The soul, unlike the mind that seeks to separate and categorize, holds all these experiences with an equal embrace. It listens without discrimination, without the need to judge or label, knowing that each moment, no matter how painful or joyful, is an essential note in the eternal symphony of existence. To listen with the soul is to accept life's contradictions, its mysteries, and its paradoxes, without clinging to certainty or explanation. As the first stars pierced the twilight veil, faint and shimmering, I was reminded of how the world often speaks not through words but through silence, the pregnant pauses between conversations, the spaces where meaning hovers just beyond articulation, and the quiet moments when the heart whispers truths the tongue cannot form. The soul's ears are finely attuned to these silences. They are the breath between musical notes, the sacred spaces where the deepest truths dwell. I thought of all those souls burdened with invisible weights, carrying grief too heavy for words, wearing smiles that mask inner storms, and keeping hopes locked away in the secret chambers of their hearts. The soul hears these hidden stories with an unerring clarity, catching the subtle tremors in a voice, the hesitation in a glance, or the lingering shadow behind a smile. In this act of listening, there is a great humility. The soul does not rush to fix or explain, it simply holds space. It offers a refuge, a sanctuary where the unspoken may dwell without fear, without shame, without the pressure to be anything other than what it is. I recalled a particular moment when a dear friend, overwhelmed by a sorrow too vast to voice, sought refuge beside me. She wept silently, her tears tracing rivers down her cheeks, and I said nothing. I did not offer advice or consolation. Instead, I let my presence be a vessel, a safe harbor where her grief could be held and honored. It was in that shared silence that I witnessed the soul's ears at work, not demanding understanding but offering love through pure presence. Such listening is sacred, a silent covenant of trust and compassion that transcends words. The night deepened around me, and with it, my awareness grew of how listening itself is an act of profound love, a love that seeks not to possess or change but to accept and accompany fully. This love is transformative, not because it alters circumstances, but because it touches the hidden recesses of the heart where healing begins. The soul's ears are conduits for this healing grace, channels through which compassion flows to those brave enough to be vulnerable, to reveal their wounds and hopes alike. In this sacred exchange, brokenness is met with tenderness, and isolation gives way to connection. I felt the life force pulse within and around me, knitting me into the vast community of silent prayers and whispered dreams that flow through the fabric of humanity. To listen with the soul's ears is to enter into a holy communion, a meeting place beyond the divisions of self and other, beyond the confines of joy and sorrow, where all dissolve into the unity of being. It is here, in this liminal space of listening, that the infinite reveals itself within the finite, the eternal within the fleeting. The gentle rustling of olive leaves stirred in the cool night breeze, and I breathed deeply, resting in the sacred stillness where the soul's language unfolds in silence. Within me grew the quiet certainty that this gift of the soul's ears is always near, waiting patiently for us to open, to surrender, to hear what the mind cannot grasp. And in this knowing, I found a peace deeper than understanding, a peace born not of answers, but of love and acceptance. The night stretched vast and mysterious above me, stars like silent sentinels scattered across the heavens. I remained beneath the ancient tree, cradled by the dark, enveloped by the silence that speaks louder than any voice. For in that silence, the soul listens, and in that listening, we are held, we are known, we are healed. The night lingered long and deep, its vastness stretching endlessly above me like a boundless ocean of velvet darkness studded with countless stars, each one a tiny beacon of light shimmering with ancient stories and timeless mysteries. The cool earth beneath my hands was steady and real, grounding me even as my spirit seemed to reach out, mingling with the whispers of the olive tree overhead. Its leaves rustled softly in the gentle night breeze, a secret conversation between earth and sky, inviting me to listen not only with my ears but with the depths of my soul, where words fall silent and pure understanding begins. It is in such sacred stillness, in the moments when all noise fades away, that the soul's ears are truly awakened, attuned to the faintest vibrations of truth and meaning that the restless mind cannot grasp. As I sat beneath the ancient tree, the tapestry of my life unfolded within me, threads of memory woven together in a delicate dance of light and shadow. Faces appeared before me, some clear and vivid, others softened and blurred by time, yet each carrying the weight of emotion that transcended mere words. I saw the woman whose eyes held a grief so vast and profound that it rendered speech useless, the boy whose laughter was but a fragile mask shielding a heart heavy with silent pain, the blind musician whose fingers coaxed from his instrument melodies that were prayers themselves, spun from sorrow and hope intertwined. These souls spoke to me in a language beyond spoken tongue, a language of silence, of presence, of raw, unfiltered being that the mind can struggle to comprehend, but which the soul understands with unerring clarity. It is a language written not in letters but in the trembling between heartbeats, in the spaces between words where the deepest truths dwell unseen. The pale moonlight poured down like liquid silver, casting ethereal glow upon the garden's wildflowers and painting long, soft shadows that shifted gently with the night's breath. The stillness around me was alive with a sacred energy, a web of invisible connections binding me to every living thing, to every whispered prayer and secret tear carried by the night. I realized then that to listen with the soul's ears is to become part of this intricate web, to sense the delicate interplay of joy and sorrow, presence and absence, light and shadow that colors our shared human experience. The soul perceives not only the words spoken aloud but also the unspoken language, the silent cry, the hidden hope, the fragile longing that lives in the quiet corners of the heart. In that expansive silence, a tender compassion blossomed within me, a quiet, unwavering love that embraced not only the sorrows and struggles of others but also the hidden wounds within myself. I came to understand that listening with the soul is not a passive act but an active surrender, a courageous opening of one's being to receive pain and beauty alike without flinching or retreating. It is a sacred trust, a delicate balance between holding space and letting go, between witnessing another's story and allowing oneself to be moved by it. The soul's ears are not mere instruments of perception, they are gateways to empathy, healing, and transformation. I reflected on the many times I had sought to teach, to share wisdom through words and verses crafted to illuminate the mind and stir the heart. Yet I knew deep within that true understanding often arises not from instruction but from the experience of being deeply heard and seen. When the soul listens without judgment, without interruption, it creates a sanctuary, a holy space where brokenness can be met with grace, where wounds may find gentle tending, and where love flows freely, unburdened by conditions or expectations. This kind of listening is a sacred art, a gift that demands patience, presence, and humility. Around me, the garden breathed softly with the rhythms of night, alive with subtle life unseen by the casual eye. I felt the pulse of that life echo within myself, a steady, grounding force that linked me intimately to the earth below and the infinite heavens above. In this unity, I found solace and strength, a profound reminder that no soul exists in isolation. The soul's ears hear the call of the cosmos itself, a call that transcends all boundaries of time and space, inviting us into ever deeper communion with the mystery of existence. As the first fragile hues of dawn began to tint the horizon, soft pinks and blues brushing gently against the sleeping world, I remained beneath the olive tree, wrapped in the tender embrace of night's final breath. In that sacred silence, I felt the presence of an eternal truth, a knowing beyond words or concepts, that the soul's ears remain always open, patiently waiting for us to lay down our defenses, to quiet the restless mind, and to listen with full, unguarded hearts. To hear with the soul's ears is to touch the divine, to be cradled in a love that never falters, and to find a home within the vast and wondrous expanse of all that is. So night after night I returned to this place beneath the ancient tree, drawn by the infinite invitation to learn anew the language of silence, the art of presence, and the profound gift of listening not only to others but to the quiet voice within. This journey is without end, a mystery unfolding with each breath, a sacred song that calls me ever deeper into the heart of life itself, a heart where we are held, we are known, and we are healed beyond measure. The dawn broke slowly, spilling soft, tender light across the horizon like a whispered promise cradled in the fragile stillness of early morning. The world held its breath in that delicate moment between night and day, as if poised on the edge of something unseen and profound, waiting for the first stirrings of a new beginning to unfold. I stood quietly at the threshold of this awakening, feeling the weight and wonder of countless nights spent in deep listening, nights when I surrendered my restless mind and opened myself fully to the silent language of the soul. Each of those moments had been a step, a thread in the vast tapestry of a journey leading me ever deeper into the mystery of the soul's ears, those sacred instruments granted to us, allowing us to hear what the mind cannot grasp, to perceive truths beyond the reach of reason and words. As the light grew gradually stronger, it painted my familiar surroundings in a new hue, revealing with gentle clarity the shapes I had come to know so well, the ancient olive tree whose twisted branches had become a steadfast companion and witness to my contemplations, the wild garden where untamed flowers bloomed with reckless courage, defying order and expectation, the eternal river, winding through the city, singing its endless song of flow and return. Yet now, through eyes softened and transformed by the practice of deep listening, these were no longer mere objects or landscapes. They breathed and lived, pulsing with the subtle whispers of the divine. Every leaf trembling in the morning breeze, every ripple catching the light on the water's surface, every warm breath of wind carried a message, a secret wrapped in silence, waiting to be heard by the soul's attentive, patient ears. In that dawning light, a profound realization settled within me. The journey of listening is not a path with a final destination or a summit to be conquered. It is an endless unfolding, an eternal dance with the unfolding mysteries of life and love. The soul's ears remain forever open, inviting us gently to quiet the endless clamor of the mind, to loosen the grip of fear and judgment, and to receive the unspoken language of the heart with grace and humility. This journey calls for both courage and surrender, the courage to face what cannot be understood, the surrender to trust in the unseen forces that shape us and the world beyond our knowing. As I stood rooted in that moment, gratitude swelled within me, rising like a sacred tide. I gave thanks for the precious gift of these soul ears, the subtle gift that lets us listen beyond appearances, beyond noise and distraction, to the hidden currents that move beneath the surface of things. I thought of the countless souls who walk this earth, each carrying their own silent song, their own hidden story etched deep in the chambers of their being. To listen with the soul's ears is to honor these stories, to hold space for them with tender compassion, with no need to fix or judge. It is to recognize the sacredness in every voice and every silence, in every fragile moment where vulnerability blooms. The sun climbed higher, flooding the world with radiant gold that chased away shadows and warmed the earth, but inside me, a deeper peace settled, a peace not born of certainty or knowing, but of wholehearted acceptance and openness to what is. The soul's listening is a sacred invitation to live fully, deeply, without reservation. To embrace the totality of existence, the beauty and the pain, the light and the shadow, as parts of a whole too vast for the mind to contain. It is a delicate and ongoing dance, a dialogue between the finite and the infinite, between the self and the divine, where each breath, each moment, is both a question and an answer, a mystery and a revelation. With every step forward, I carry this awareness as a sacred companion, walking through the world with eyes and ears wide open, with a heart tender yet resilient. I listen intently for the silent songs that call me onward, those melodies hidden beneath the surface, the truths that shape the very fabric of life, the love that threads through all things like a golden, unbreakable strand. In this deep listening, I find my home, not just within the depths of my own soul but in the vast, boundless expanse of all that is, all that was, and all that ever will be. The soul has its own ears, a divine gift to hear what the mind cannot understand, and through this gift, we are drawn ever deeper into the radiant, infinite mystery of being alive, alive to wonder, to love, to connection, and to the eternal dance of existence itself.